Welcome back to The Marketing Factor. I'm your host, Austin Dandridge, the CEO of Cobble Hill. And today I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest, Molly Fienning, a serial entrepreneur and brand builder who has mastered the art of creating communities, not just companies. Molly's entrepreneurial journey spans from co-founding Babyators, the children's sunglasses brand that revolutionized kids' eyewear, to leading red clay hot sauce into national recognition. And now onto her newest venture, SipLand, a pioneering platform redefining non-alcoholic beverage culture through thoughtful curation, compelling content, and vibrant community building. Molly, thanks so much for coming on The Marketing Factor.
Thank you so much for having me, Austin. Excited to be here.
What is the last book that you read that really resonated with you?
Oh my gosh. So many. I actually go through periods where books that are really important to me, I reread again 2 or 3 times. So I would say Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza. I've reread most recently, but I had read it a couple times before. And I am deep into the sort of Joe Dispenza quantum realm meditations to sort of bring in my truth and reality and kind of recenter with myself. And I just started a book called Leader as Healer, which I'm really excited about, this idea of what is a new paradigm and how do we think about leadership in the 21st century.
Nice. Have you done any of Joe Dispenza's retreats?
So I have not done a retreat yet, but I signed up for one in June to Cancun, and I am so excited. But I've read a couple of his books, and I do either 30 or 60-minute meditation of his almost every day. So I'm excited to sort of spend some time in person with the community. And speaking of kind of the power of in-person in real life communities, but I definitely feel connected to his teachings and methodology in any case.
Yeah, he's super cool. Have you ever read The Untethered Soul?
I have. I sort of at the start of my whole sort of own spiritual journey, probably now 5 or 6 years ago. That is something I need to refresh, but I would love to hear the power of it for you.
I love it. I always come back to it. I keep it next to me, like on my nightstand, and I always recommend it to people. And people that have come on this podcast have recommended it too. And Peter Kang, who owns this agency called Barrel, I recommended it to him, and actually got a note from him this morning that said he read it, it resonated with him. It's just such like a shift in your thinking and how like just mindset matters, and like placing yourself and your ego in this, journey of life is just so important. And I think as like an entrepreneur, it's something I keep coming back to, because I always feel as an entrepreneur, there's so much responsibility you place on yourself, responsibility from others, from your family. But I think it's so important to like take a step back and just look at things and be able to kind of place yourself in the world. And I feel like everything that this journey that you've been on and what I've been experiencing just through your social media and how you really love to share on your Instagram. And I feel like it's super powerful in kind of creating community through your words and through your platform. But I'm wondering if you've had realizations like that where there was like a moment that clicked for you where you were like, whoa, like there's more to this world than the success of my business or the success of me or, just 100%. Something like that.
100%. I mean, I think so I have a nightstand and it's stacked up like 8 or 10 books, and Untethered Soul is in it. And I just sort of kind of keep coming back to it again and again. And I need to work. This is a good universal reminder to do that. But I think I've always been sort of a seeker, and I don't know if that's everybody or just, as far as long as I can remember, so I grew up Catholic and had went to Catholic school for my whole life. I have a long lineage of Catholicism, but did not have that Catholic, had these progressive New York City nuns that actually at this all girls school encouraged us to be curious, encouraged us to question. We studied world religions. We studied all the faiths in addition to the teachings of Jesus, which ultimately are about like love, acceptance, welcoming, and not judgment, criticism, exclusion, right? And and then when I went to college, got into sort of Eastern faith and yoga and meditation early on, and it's always kind of come back to it, right? But it's much more about like the universal Christ, right? The sort of loving kind of light and wisdom, and less about the dogma of sort of human-based church parameters for me. And as it relates to sort of, I had kind of deep dove into that for various personal reasons that we can discuss today over the past kind of 5 years. And it feels like just this larger question, to your point, as an entrepreneur or just an ambitious, goal-oriented human today, right? And you could be in finance, you could be, whatever. It's like there's this struggle between ego and soul. And I think it is learning how to put the ego aside when it's not needed, right? When it's not those moments of like egoic protection, like for death, or what am I going to have for dinner, or minor decisions, but letting the soul and its truth and your heart's calling really guide you, and kind of checking in. I call it like dropping into that energy before you make those decisions for your business as you're guiding and leading your team. And that's ultimately what this book I'm reading now, Leader is Healer, is about. And so for sure, I lead differently. I operate, even SipLand versus Red Clay versus Babyators. I come from a place of a very deep attunement and alignment to values with this new company that I had never have before. And it feels very flow state and like kind of like downhill energy, going with the river current, in a really cool way that I'm excited to kind of explore.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like as you get more experience under your belt, go through life, become, more well-rounded as a human and stuff like that, that you approach business ventures with a much more, at least for me, I feel like I'm able to loosen up the reins a bit and enter that flow state, like you were saying, where it's the control is outside of my hands a little bit. I can do as much as I can, but I shouldn't try to micromanage things, or I should, create intention around what we're doing, because that serves me better. It serves the purpose of what we're doing better.
And control and micromanaging ultimately comes from a place of fear, right? You're like, this isn't going to work. I've got to hold tighter. I've got to grip tighter to my fictions. And when you come from a place of trust in the universe, whatever you believe is out there, God, even though that word scares people sometimes, like wants what's best for us, right? And abundance and goodness. And if you kind of lean into that and trust the sort of that everything is exactly as it's supposed to be, then you can kind of exhale and let go of the reins and embrace failure, embrace setbacks, changes, pivots, and lean into what works and feels easy.
So when you started Babyators, great idea, incredible timing. From an entrepreneur standpoint, we were in a much different place with market, and you're kind of first to market for something like that.
Were.
Was there intention behind it when you set out? Were you thinking of, okay, how am I going to lead this business? How am I going to shape the way our brand ethos is and what we communicate to our team?
I think there was intention, and I think I think differently about intention kind of at a deeper level now than I did then. And I think because of that experience, right? I think those experiences at Babyators and Red Clay taught me to be a better leader and the leader I am today. But in terms of, yes, we were first to market. I think the only children's sunglasses out there other than like the junky, like you kind of get the SpongeBob SquarePants Disney kind of like ones at the counter that were $8. The only really kind of, and then you have the luxury like junior Gucci's for $200. So there wasn't that really high quality, cool middle market pair of sunglasses for babies or kids. And the initial intention was for me kind of lifestyle. And I want to say for my partner's lifestyle as well. So my ex-husband, Ted, and I started it with another couple who were dear friends of ours from college. They were both consultants, in Atlanta at two different consulting companies. So they were kind of on ships passing in the night and planes like Monday to Friday. And I had kind of left my job in computer science, and I was interested in going into sort of security intelligence in the DC space around kind of open source tech platforms, and could not do that as a military wife, like living all over the South. And so I think all three of us were like, what can we build? Because we want to work together. We know we vibe. We know all of our skill sets are complementary. I was the marketing PR person. Carolyn, the wife, was really kind of the ops, detail oriented, could take a 350-page Macy's EDI manual and get it all right to a T. And Matthew was the finance budget projector, brain. And then Ted was in the military still. And so he was more this idea generator. He came up with the name Babyators. But we really were like thinking about intentionally starting something for like the journey of entrepreneurship and kind of where our lifestyles were in that moment and what we wanted to achieve in our careers. And if I were to look at the intention of starting SipLand today, it is, it is much more about kind of alignment and authenticity and like wanting to offer the world a chance to kind of tune in further, party, celebrate, bring people together without the alcohol, right? And so it's more about like, how can I make a difference here? How can I help others? And less about, this will be fun. This will be great, opportunity for us. This will be kind of a great learning experience for us. And it was basically my MBA, right? Babyators was, experiential master's in business degree. But that, there's a book, speaking of kind of spiritual books, that kind of speaks to this that I love, called Falling Upwards by Richard Rohr. And it's about the two mountains of life. And the first mountain is about kind of pleasing the world, looking outward, you're climbing, checking the boxes, getting the good grades, making your parents happy. And then at some point in your middle of your life, and it could be depending on what experience happens, it could be early in your 30s, it could be later in your 50s, it could be never at all. Some people don't ever participate in the second mountain, for various reasons, but you hit a valley and you're kind of like, whoa, I did everything right, but I've fallen. And that doesn't make sense because I've done everything right. For people that are like, I can, get the good grades and go to the good schools and check the boxes and make my teachers' parents happy. And so then you come to this existential crisis where you're like, wow, it's not about pleasing other people. It is about turning inward and being true to what my heart is telling me. And the second mountain of life is a personal journey. And it is often kind of very sort of inward, introspective, I'm living authentically spiritual journey. And all of a sudden, everything you do, including your businesses, is about kind of truth from within, as opposed to looking outward to what does the market need? What is the, how do I build that great business that I can sell? And I sold a business, and it's not about outward approval anymore. It's about inward connection.
So when you think of that from the fundamentals of a business and operating a business, it's hard to square those two sometimes because you have conflicting personalities sometimes at a business, whether it's vendors you're working with or your team or, clients, and they might not have that. They might not be at that second mountain, right? What are some things you found just from leading that make that resonate, or you're able to teach people, or at least give up some of that feeling of control?
think that's a great question. And what I have found with SipLand is, again, first of all, like a letting go of attachment to the outcome, right? It's like, we're setting our goals and we're kind of really tuning into sort of our truth and what is aligned and authentic for my co-founder and me. And thus the energy that we are bringing to the vehicle or the container that is SipLand, right? And we keep coming back to that intention of like, okay, for different reasons, she's in her 20s, I'm in my 40s. We chose to change our relationships to alcohol. And we wanted to create a space where like we are both foodies and love a beautiful, well-crafted cocktail. It's like, we wanted to create a space where we still want to go out. We still want to party. We just want to have delicious, elevated options that don't have that. And so in the spirit for me of presence, tuning in, being a better friend, mother, human, like I find my brain works better, like for a variety of different reasons. And I'm not sober. I'll still once in a while go out and drink, but it was the intention of, I want to create a world where not drinking is as fun, delicious, sexy as drinking. And so when we keep coming back to that intention, we then, the business itself is, you use the word resonate. And I think that's a really good one, resonating on a frequency of that. And so we are bringing in community, clients, vendors, partners that have the same intention, ambition, goal, like energetic frequency. And that's what feels easy and flow. And we like see each other, we get it. And I have stopped trying to force client relationships, team relationships, employee relationships that don't align on that same frequency, because it's like you're no longer resonating at an energetic match and you're causing yourself pain and friction unnecessarily for no reason. So the good leader kind of surrenders to the like, okay, well, this clearly isn't a match. And you have to say no to revenue. Like, okay, this client is just going to cause more headaches than blessings. Okay, this team member is going to taint the vibe we have going. So it might not be the right immediate business decision, but if you stay aligned to that goal, intention, and resonate at that frequency, and like it will blossom, like goodness will come. And for me, that's where I found like really strong communities gather around because it feels good.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that there's so much to that. I think it's really hard for someone who is younger to know that, right? It almost feels like it has to be learned through life experience. Though I feel like now there's so many resources that potentially allow us to learn at a quicker pace than maybe when we were coming up, to develop this kind of intuition on, hey, my actions actually matter and affect what's going on with the vibe here more so than, I'm aware of. Do you think that is possible are you seeing younger entrepreneurs these days, especially younger women entrepreneurs, able to kind of lead at a much quicker pace and come to a much higher level now than they were when you started?
God, that's a great question. And I think even entrepreneur versus female entrepreneur, your point about young female leaders is a great distinction, because I think one thing, often entrepreneurial women are the kind of the go-getter, ambitious, want to check the boxes, want to get the good grades. And the shadow side of that is they've been trained at a very young age, typically starting at like 11, 12, 13, maybe a little younger, is that they people please, right? And so they quiet their truth, they disconnect from their intuition, not knowing, which I believe is sort of the divinity with all of us. And they quiet it to make others happy. Okay, I want to really do this, but my parents think it's a bad idea. I want to be a ballerina, but my mom says that's not going to make any money. So I'm going to go into finance, right? And they disconnect from their truth. And so I feel like there's a certain kind of reckoning, and that could be the valley between the two mountains, or just, it could, some people hear or feel the discord, the dissonance younger when it's quieter and they listen. And other people like me shush it and they're like, no, be quiet. And they don't listen to it, even though they know. And it gets louder and louder and louder. And often, I mean, for instance, like for me, I've had many personal journeys where it was like, I have been gripping it together, like holding it, like, no, this is going to work. Back to the control, to the forcing, where the universe is like, just let go, And so the universe, like, if there's an expression, if you don't hear the whispers, you feel the cries and screams. So whatever's meant for you is going to happen. And it's a question of, do you let it happen naturally, or do you go kicking and screaming? And then there's an avalanche behind you and there's no turning back, right? And so it's like learning how to tune in. And I actually think this next economy, awareness, paradigm, future is going to be about kind of really an individuation and listening to our own unique journeys earlier and living them. And I actually see 20-year-olds today, and really empowered 20-year-old women specifically, holding boundaries that I did not and could not hold in my 20s. And they say, you know what? I don't work on weekends. You know what? After 5 p.m., I'm not going to answer an email. And I'd be like, what? And then I was like the boss. And then I'm like, no, that's fucking cool. Like, yes, you should be working on weekends. Like, I should be asking you to work on your weekends. And so, like, there is an energy coming with young people of a wisdom and a self-worth and a boundary holding that I have not seen in any other generation of women today.
Well, and I think that's totally true. I see that a lot as well. And I think there are a chorus of people that were saying, these damn millennials, they don't work as hard as we did when we were growing up. But I think on the other hand, things can happen much quicker now, like in terms of efficiency and the way that things are done through technology, through communication, through just more knowledge out there, and people, in general, feeling like they have more, there's more ability for them to grow.
I completely agree. And I also I've heard that too. And I've probably said that myself a couple of times of like, can you believe these people? And it's like, actually, no, they're holding boundaries. They have self-worth and they're not willing to be your slave and work for you for peanuts. And they're willing, they want to protect their mental health and their bodily health. And like, I think that is something that we should all be inspired by and take with us, and how I learned from them it's a huge reminder for me to kind of continue to do that as like a recovered people pleaser myself.
Yeah, me too, because I feel like my old self would say, God, like, what a jerk. We've come so far, I think. And this is part of the like growth of humanity, is to be like, okay, that actually didn't really work. And we burnt a lot of people out, and there actually wasn't that much, there wasn't, things were not as they thrived, but now they're thriving even more in certain scenarios that I think gives us the opportunity to say, all right, you know what, don't be so judgmental, Austin, of this person who doesn't want to work on weekends, that even though you did and you worked long, crazy hours. I mean, a big thing that we talk about, Carter and I, is, man, we worked so hard living in New York, like we would stay till 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, doing, and I'm sure there are people that still do that, but it feels like less of a prerequisite for being great at your job these days.
100%. And it almost back when we were young, in our early 20s, those young jobs, it was like this rite of passage. Like you had to kill yourself. You had to be up 4 a.m. And I remember, one of my first jobs right out of college, I went to IBM for 9 months. And very quickly realized large corporate America is not for me. And said to my dad, who was in finance in that world, and was like, I'm ready to do something different. He's like, well, no, an analyst program is 2 years. So you have to finish the 2 years. That was the commitment. And I'm like, no, why? Like, life is too short. And I didn't. And I actually went to them and said, this doesn't feel right. And they're like, but everyone loves you. We speak highly of you. And I was like, it doesn't feel good to me, right? And they said, take a couple months off, do a sabbatical, then decide. We don't want you to make a rash decision. And after 3 months, I went to the Appalachian Mountains and volunteered there and worked with kids and on welfare, and was like, no, I want to do something different. And came back and said, thank you, no, thank you. But there isn't there isn't these shoulds and kind of the killing yourself for what. And I think that when you come from a place of alignment to your truth and your values, and that requires connecting and listening in, you get more done with less work. To your point about like where we are with changing technologies, energies, all of that, it won't be about killing ourselves for little output. It will be about little work for lots of beautiful aligned outcomes.
You feel like you should always trust your gut. Like, is your gut instinct always like what you rely on? Are there ever times where your gut has failed you? Or
I have only in the past couple of years been really on a journey of listening to that inner voice. Gut, I call it intuition. And I believe both are really the voice of like the greater knowing in you. And I believe if it is truly like you're listening in, I would say go with it 100% of the time.
Are you like hyper analytical, or do you make decisions quickly?
I'm very action oriented. Like, I'm like, specifically, I think, actually, that's a really good point. Specifically when I know it is right inside.
Yeah.
And I think the moments where I didn't know it was right inside, I remember, so my ex and I divorced a couple of years ago, and there was a good 9-month period where I kind of knew the marriage was over, but I couldn't know. I couldn't act on it. It was like we were in this gray. I didn't know. And everyone around me is offering their 2 cents, and there was so much noise. And I had a healer say to me, who just like this wonderful woman who's trained in the ancient Mayan lineage. And one of my dear friends was like, you need her, you need to go to her. So I went to her. I was looking everywhere outward for the answer, right? The people pleasing me is like, what do I do? Googling parents, therapists, like everyone tell me what I should do. And she said, what does your gut tell you? And I was listening to all the noise out that I wasn't honoring the gut, or I heard the gut and I was scared of the answer, right? I was like, oh no, the gut says this is no longer working and I need to go. And that was like a scary answer. And she said to me, if it's gray, you stay. And I loved that in the sense that like, if you don't have a clear answer, if you don't have the connection to your gut or your intuition yet, you don't go anywhere, you don't make a decision, and you sit and you keep asking for, praying for, tuning in, journaling, whatever your way to like connect to yourself is for clarity, for the answer, and it will come. And so that can be a small business decision of like, do I take this client or not? Do I hire this person or not? In the case of entrepreneurship, you think about that employee that you kind of knew you should have fired, but you're like, eek, I don't have a replacement for them. Eek, they do a lot of work, but like, there's a knowing of like, and you sit on it, and it's like, you wait until you know, and then you pull the Band-Aid off, right? And so I've now, when I don't have a clear answer, ask, pray, journal for clarity. And it comes when timing is right.
It feels like there's a balance though, because if you're always looking for signs, then it's hard to make those decisions sometimes. And sometimes things can linger. I find myself when I'm making big decisions or micro decisions, if I'm looking for signs, I'm not feeling it in my gut, because I'm pretty analytical and I like to overthink things. And I think partly is due to Carter and I run Cobble Hill together, right? So every decision that we make impacts not only the business, but the family, and there's lots of intermingling there. So there's almost 2 voices that need to be considered for big decisions like that, which is great on one hand, but sometimes when you're not able to trust your gut, you're always looking for signs. Do you find that being too woo-woo, for lack of a better word, can hinder business development?
I mean, I think you said it right there for me, is like looking for signs versus listening to your gut. Like if you're looking for signs, you're looking outward. If you're listening to your gut, that's the turning in, and the answer is with it. Like the right answer is with
Yeah.
it. You know, right? And so if you don't know, you wait till you know, right? And so it's not I'm going to look outward. I'm going to look for signs. I'm going to look for the butterfly that flies across. I'm going to look for I'm not looking for outward signs. I'm looking for like that like gut check of like, this is right. And that for me is the alignment and the truth, and not the head, not the analytics, not the data, not that we'll make this much money, but like, does this feel right in my body?
I feel like SipLand is very much focused on community building. Like the way that business really thrives is around creating community and supporting other people's building networks. Is that something that you feel like is just going to continue to grow a business like that, this community building ethos or feeling? Do you think that works for the modern D2C brand? I will say, I think that it does. I feel like that's the only way that businesses can thrive now, is if they have somewhat of a community aspect at a local level, at a more national level, or something like that, where it feels like you're becoming part of something bigger, at least for a luxury item, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think for SipLand and back, like, to follow on the conversation of like tuning in, like I chose to stop drinking alcohol in that journey of not being able to know my clarity, to specifically hear my gut and intuition louder. Like the alcohol was numbing my ability to listen, or blocking, quieting my ability to listen to my voice. And for some people, and I was never even a big drinker, like the one glass of wine at night was like, I was feeling my feelings. Alcohol was kind of sitting on top of that and like blocking me from those. And so the tuning, like we started SipLand for me to kind of, tune in. And then with SipLand, it's like, we want to create a space, opportunities, experiences for people to tune into themselves and go out and party and celebrate. And so the community naturally flows from a business that is aligned authentically to its values. As I think one step before community, because you can have like these false community kind of like, let's have an event that just feels flat and nobody shows up or whatever. A company's first got to know what is its core value? Why is it existing? What is its contribution to the world? What is its unique value proposition? And then from there, when you make that very clear in your website, in your ads, digitally, and then you draw people to you who are aligned to that same value. And I completely agree that every digital brand also needs the experiential analog movement, right? We're craving as a human population, but like we are in a digital age, that's not changing, but we want and crave and need that in-person interaction. And so how does a company think about both its digital presence in an authentic way to bring community together online, but then it's in real life, beautiful experiential bricks and mortar moment that people get a sense and taste and feel of the brand. And for us, with SipLand, we wanted to champion non-alc brands to do that in their own ways. So each one of our clients, and so we consider ourselves like a brand agency supporting, we call ourselves a drink success consultancy for like the non-alc, low alcohol space. So we want to support these great brands that are making delicious products, find those communities through really on-brand, like experiential moments in real.
That's cool. The first project that Cobble Hill did, one of the first projects was actually two that kind of really resonate with this. Was first one was for Lululemon was opening their first kind of flagship store in Charleston. And we were brought on board to basically document and create marketing material around that whole thing. And it was so powerful in the way that they approached that, because they identified 10 of the best kind of fitness, influencers, for lack of a better word. That term wasn't around back then, but fitness people in
Ambassadors,
Charleston created a bunch of different, we basically shot them in all these different scenarios where they were actually doing what they were meant to be doing. They did, they were wearing Lululemon, but you couldn't really see it. And then it all culminated with this great event that was on King Street, where we shut down King Street and did this yoga with there's probably 500 people at this like giant yoga thing where we shut down King Street. And I remember thinking like, wow, that's just I know a lot of brands do that, but like you couldn't do that if you were just starting out, right? Like you couldn't do that if Lululemon's brand ethos wasn't like wellness for all, kind of like this feeling of being part of a greater community. And I think that the successful brands, you're right, like you can't just kind of square it in and just be like, let's just host this event and invite all these influencers and come and document it and then hope they'll post it on their social. Like it has to have more than that to me.
I completely agree. And I think we're seeing even a little bit of that exhaustion now on social, where specifically Charleston, where there's so many, influential voices from social media who live here, and brands come in and just want to like step and repeat. Let's have the event. Let's have the dinner. Because they saw all those formative brands like Lululemon do it first. And they're like, let's just replicate it. And it doesn't work for them because it's not authentic. Right. And so people are getting tired of just seeing the repeat. And I'm finding that, you mentioned a small brand starting out, it's all about niche, right? And authenticity and community. So like, who are your 5 customers that are your like VIP super customers? And how do you speak to them? And how do you gather those almost like your most authentic customers as your influencers to start? Right. And bring together small micro groups. It's like the power of the micro influencer is where we are headed, and bringing those people together, like your VIP customers are your greatest ambassadors, influencers when you're a small business. So.
Totally. Just latch on to those customers, those ambassadors, get feedback from them, invite them to things. I feel like just making sure that they understand, pick up the phone and call them,
Totally.
I think it's
I was on a panel earlier this week with 3 of our clients in the like women-owned non-alc bev products. And one of them is a company called Aplos that's owned by actually a woman and a man. But the woman was speaking on the panel, Emily and David, her partner. Emily was on the panel with me, and we were talking about just this. When she started out, they did a little, who is our customer? And it was like, Iris, who lives in New York City, who's vegetarian, who does Pilates 5 times a week, who like only that drinks oat milk matcha lattes. Like this is their dream customer. Cut to like a year later, and they do a data analyst. And first of all, the moderator was like, I kind of hate that person. like a year later, who's their customer? Donna, who's 66, whose favorite restaurant is Chick-fil-A, who is obsessed with Aplos and buys it. So it's like, oh my God, like we are not like we need to go and support the Donnas of the world, and really rally the Donnas around Aplos, because they, alcohol no longer serves her body, and she wants to unwind with something that kind of makes her feel good. And she is like a super customer and buys it in bulk. And so who you think you're going to be, and then who the market truly dictates, speaks to your values, are 2 different women. And we were like laughing hysterically about that. But like the power of the Donna in that example was the lesson for me and for Emily.
Well, for Donna, I think Aplos is probably like aspirational a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. Like she feels like, oh wow, this is like cool. I've discovered this almost, or like this is mine. But I agree, you kind of have to at least frame it where you want that aspiration to land when you're starting this brand. But you always kind of have to follow the data and the customer. And I do think that it's just, you have to stay in touch with your customers. Brands get bigger. They try to, I think, automate a lot of that customer service and that customer experience. And I think that if you lose that, that's when you see things start to plateau. Because really, and you said this before, your favorite part of business is like starting the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then not running it. And
I'm an alchemist. I love creating something out of nothing. That's like my gift and my archetype. And like, that's where I really get my energy.
Yeah. And I feel like that's, you have a very creative mind. You're able to see a vision. You're exposed to a lot of things that give you great influences, and you can kind of read where things are headed. And that makes a great kind of entrepreneur. And it hits this point where the rubber hits the road, and you have to make payroll. You have to buy that next shipment or something like that. And you need someone like an operations person, an operator. Yeah. So how do you find great operators?
I have to hire that person. And then also like that person can take my business to the next level, right? So like they might not want to start something from ground zero, but they want to take a running business that has a couple $100,000 or a couple million in revenue and grow it and scale it. And that's their gift and, sweet spot and expertise.
Well, and sometimes that's a much more compelling journey. Mm-hmm. I do think that like it doesn't necessarily even depend on what your experience is, but you might have had something that shifted for you, or you've been exposed to something. And I think that you're like, oh, wow, it might actually be easier to just take something that's already created. But there is beauty in like starting something from that seed of an idea and building it up. Have you read Rick Rubin's book at all?
The one that has the circle on the cover?
Yeah.
I have I own it. It's actually on my bedside table as well. I've opened up and like been inspired by pages and pieces of it, but have not read it cover to cover.
Yeah. I mean, it's not really, I don't think it's necessarily been meant to be read cover to cover, but it does feel like
on creativity, basically.
Basically, it's, it's like, how do these ideas germinate? Like, where do people find inspiration? What are tactics that you can use based on your skill set to kind of come up with an idea, or at least flesh it out more? And for him, it's almost like there's two parts of it. There's this, how do you create these seeds of ideas? And then how do you actually grow them? And how do you know which ones to kind of grab onto and latch onto? So how do you, when you take Babyators to hot sauce, and then now to Non-Alc, SipLand, the feeling is like very rooted in meeting the consumer, the customer. Have you ever felt like, I want to try something completely different here? I want to, get into software or something like that? Or do you feel rooted in, this stuff speaks to me, this is where I want to be?
I think for me, in all three of those examples, like looking back when you talk about that as like an arc of my own journey and growth, it's almost like I was the customer in every one of those moments at the time. And so it's like I started a business for myself. And that's maybe where the alignment came in. It was like, I was pregnant when we started Babyators, right? And so I was very much the new mom, baby on my arm, calling stores while the baby's napping. Our children are in every single photo shoot. They're with me all the time, and then as they got older and aged out, I stepped into Red Clay, and I was living this food and bev. Charleston, in my opinion, is the best food and bev community in the world. And so it's like tapping into sort of being a customer. I was genuinely, I started Red Clay because I was a customer at the Ordinary and tried the sauce and fell in love with it. And so it's like, I want this in my pantry. I want this to be in every kitchen. It's the most delicious hot sauce I've ever had. And so now with SipLand, I'm on a journey of tuning in and changing relationship to alcohol so I can focus on presence, but still want like moments to celebrate without alcohol, delicious, well-crafted cocktails without alcohol. And I'm building something for myself. And so and specifically with this one, it's not a product-based business. Like, we're not CPG. I am a marketing 360 brand agency, right? And so it's like, we want to support the product-based businesses by building, the experiences, the photo shoots, the video shoots, the social strategy for them. And even like we had General Motors reach out to us and say, we love what you did at the Auberge Hotel. And we are doing a California roadshow for our most luxe vehicle. And we have VIPs flying and we have press coming in. We need caviar and champagne, but we cannot serve them champagne and have them get behind the wheel and drive. So what does that look like without out? How do you build the most beautiful luxe sip food and drink moment? But is it NA champagne? Is it what? And so we're playing around with creative concepts for General Motors. And then after they called us, I was like, oh my God, the auto industry, like we didn't even talk about the auto industry, like the liability, they can't serve out at all because of just, it's too much of a risk that they're not willing to take. And so when I think about it, maybe eventually software, and I actually was a CS major in college, but like I would build it from a place of like, what do I need as a customer? What software do I feel is lacking? And like me being the first customer is the line.
Yeah. The scalability of something like hot sauce to me seems incredibly competitive, challenging. You're vying for shelf space. Do you think there's room for these CPG brands to not be omni-channel and just be direct to consumer?
100%. And I actually think that if I were looking back on Red Plate and our journey and what I learned from it, it's like that would be what I recommend to anybody starting out today, specifically in food and bev, and considering grocery retail. It is incredibly costly to roll out to the grocery shelves, and you're competing against billion-dollar brands like Kraft Heinz and Unilever and Coca-Cola or whatever, and that already have all those relationships, that already are paying through the nose. And so what these little brands do, and I saw this firsthand, and I saw a lot of businesses, our competitors in our condiment space and in complemented categories, do this so much that they basically ran out of cash and folded, was they raise money. They do a raise to get to Whole Foods. They do a raise to get to Kroger. They do a raise, and they're raising and raising. And so first of all, the CEO and the team are distracted because they're both raising all the time and trying to run the business. And capital raising is a full-time job. So they're basically running two full-time jobs. And then once they get on the shelf and have diluted themselves by giving up 10, 20% of the company for a couple $100,000 or $1 million or whatever they've raised, they then have to get more money to market because it costs to then be in the catalogs. It costs to be in the promos and do all the gifts so that it moves off these shelves. And the founder dilutes to the point where they don't have enough money or skin in the game, ownership percentage to justify killing themselves the way the business really demands the full-time entrepreneur. And so then they basically either fold or walk away or whatever. And so what Jeff and I kind of saw this coming a couple of years ago, and we scaled back retail, stopped the capital raising, and focused solely on our highest margin channels, which were direct to consumer and food service. Because for food service, it was like, higher margin because they're buying in bulk. But secondly, it's an opportunity for these customers to taste the hot sauce and discover it and fall in love with it so that they then go buy it themselves. So it's a marketing channel to direct to consumer. And so I think you want to wait till you're at, lean into direct, lean into higher margin channels like food and bev, hospitality, food service in the food space. Until those grocery stores, it's a pull, not a push. They hear so much about you. You're so buzzy that they're willing to waive the fees. They want you on the shelf. The customers are asking for it. And then you don't have to compete and play the game. You can just be kind of brought in as like a specialty item, and you don't lose your shirt in the process.
And you might not sell for $3 billion in the future, but you still have great margins that can support a great business. That
totally. And you might make more money selling it for 10 or 30 million and not having given up 80% of it through the 5 or 6 capital raises you did in the process.
And have less gray hair to show for it too.
Exactly. Enjoy yourself more. And back to what you were saying, like stay in dialogue with the customer, right? The beauty of the D2C model is you know your customer, you have direct access to them, you have their emails, you can dialogue, you can ask for feedback. This is something Babyators does really well. We had our idea wing where we would solicit from our best customers, new ideas, product ideas, color ideas, pattern ideas, and they felt part of the journey and thus were more likely to buy, share, gift. And so really making your customers your influencers, your advocates, your ambassadors, the way Lululemon did as well.
Molly, thanks so much for coming on the Marketing Factor. Where can people learn more about SipLand, yourself, your other business ventures?
SipLand is SipLand.co, SIPLAND.co and .com, or not .com, but .co is the URL. And same with our Instagram handle, SipLand.co. And I'm at Molly Fienning, and Babyators is babyators.com, and Red Clay Hot Sauce.
Thanks.